Hi, my name is Zach, and I'm a tutor here at Chegg.com. Specifically, I tutor in anything from algebra, pre-calculus, chemistry, biochemistry. Those are my main tutoring focuses. But anyway, today I'm here to talk to you about the chemical level of organization and what this means for life. And it's pretty exciting. It's pretty important. And so let's jump right into this lesson. So the chemical organization of things starts with these things called subatomic particles. And they're these really, really tiny particles. And we'll talk about more about those here in a second. But I just want to go over the level first of how these are organized. So the subatomic particles come together and they make atoms, which are a little bigger. And then the atoms come together and make molecules, which are even bigger. And then finally, the macromolecules come together, which are just many molecules, and those are even bigger. And then the macromolecules come together and make us. So that's pretty cool, pretty exciting. And I hope by the end of this video, you're as excited about it as I am. Okay, so what are subatomic particles? Well, we have three types of subatomic particles. We have something called electrons, which have a negative charge on them. We have another thing. We have another subatomic particle called the proton, which has a positive charge. And we have one other subatomic particle, and that is called the neutron, which is neutral or has no charge. So when I think about protons, electrons, and neutrons, I like to have like the P's go together. Protons are positive. P's go together. Neutrons sound neutral, and so they have no charge. Electrons, on the other hand, though, a little harder to wrap your head around them being negative. But it's one of those things you just have to, with practice, keep working at, and eventually it'll just be second nature to know that electrons are negative. Okay? So what happens when we put all these electrons, protons, and neutrons together? Well, depending upon how we put them together and what numbers we put them together, we get different types of atoms. And there are lots of atoms. If you look at the periodic table, I mean, you can see here there are all kinds of atoms. Anything from hydrogen to helium, those things you blow up balloons with and make them rise in the air. Sodium, chloride, put those together, you get table salt. So there's lots of atoms. And so let's look at what makes up an atom. So in this specific example, we have the atom carbon. So carbon has 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, and 6 protons. So I'm going to go ahead and label this up here again as electron. The neutrons down here, and our proton right there. Okay. So in the atom here, we have the electrons on the outside, what we call the electron cloud. Let's go ahead and label that as the electron cloud. And then here in the middle, where we have the protons and neutrons, we have another important thing, part of the atom, which is called the nucleus. Okay, move that up here so you can read it. Okay, so the atom is essentially made of two parts, the electron cloud and the nucleus. The electron cloud is out here on the periphery where all the electrons are spinning around. They're negative, and so they're attracted to this positive nucleus where the protons are. Okay, and so the center of it we call the nucleus, where the protons and neutrons are, and the outside is the electron cloud where the electrons are. I read on the Chegg description of what this video is that you can look at the electron cloud as kind of like a ball of cotton candy. It's light, fluffy, it kind of goes everywhere. And the nucleus is kind of, you put a golf ball in the center of that cotton candy. It's really hard, firm, right where it's at. Okay? So if you think of the electron cloud and the nucleus this way, it may help you visualize, what's actually going on. Okay. So now what happens when more than one of these atoms comes together? And that's when we start forming what's called molecules. Okay? And so this is like, I'll have another nucleus over here, and these two electron clouds will be kind of sharing space together. And so they'll have an affinity for one another, or want to come together. when this happens, we can get things like these here. So here I have 3 different molecules. Let's start with this guy right here. Probably one of the most important molecules we have, and this is called water. You can see that it's the atom oxygen combined with 2 hydrogens. Okay, and with this molecule, I mean, you swim in water, you drink water every day. This is what you're drinking. This is what you're swimming in. Kind of cool. At least I think so. Okay, but let's get to these other 2 molecules over here, which may be a little more interesting as far as structurally. This one here is called glucose. Glucose is what our body uses to basically run. Without it, our brain would die, and without our brain, we're not much for people. And so we really need glucose. And you can see that glucose is really just made of the same things water is, and we add carbon, that atom we looked at on the previous slide. And each of these corners here represent carbon atoms. They're not drawn in this diagram, but they are carbons. And so we have carbons here, 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 here. We have hydrogens all over the place, and we also have oxygens. And that's all that makes up this molecule. So we went from water to glucose by just adding more oxygens and hydrogens and more carbons. So that's pretty cool, We can change the complete structure of something from something that we swim in to the sticky, sweet stuff that makes everything taste good and fuels our brain. Okay. And now down here we have another molecule, and let me move this real quick. Okay. And this right here is called ethanol. So ethanol is the major component of alcohol and what makes you and I get drunk when we drink. Hopefully you don't, but if you do. Anyway, so ethanol is the intoxicating substance in alcohol. And you can see that between glucose and water, it's not all that different. Really you have the same atoms, carbons, hydrogens, oxygens. Not much has changed, but we change the organization of it. We add more atoms or less atoms, and we get completely different function, And so that's pretty cool. So what happens when we put all these things together? So if we put all these things together, we start getting macromolecules, and here's one of my favorite macromolecules called deoxyribose nucleic acid, or we can just say for short, DNA. DNA is the chemical that basically tells our bodies, what to produce, when to produce it, how to produce it. It is the template that allows life to be life. Pretty cool. And so we were talking in the other previous page about a molecule called glucose. Well, in DNA, we have a similar sugar, and it's not glucose, but it's called ribose. It's 1 carbon less than glucose. And you can see here that we have this ribose subunit just repeated all the way through the structure of DNA. And then we add some other molecules. These right here are called nucleotide bases. Kind of hard to see because we're in this turn here, but you can see them more clearly here and here. And so those are just made of nitrogens, oxygens, carbons, hydrogens, and then those bind to the sugar, and the sugar binds to a phosphate that's bound to oxygen. So, it's called a phosphate. It's a phosphorus bound to oxygen. Excuse me. But anyway, so this gold here is the on the atomic table, the element P, or phosphorus. So that's pretty cool. You see all these atoms coming together and making this big structure that is critical for life. Okay. And so one other thing I wanted to show you, just for relative size, DNA can become massive too. But this right here is a protein, and it's a macromolecule. And this specific protein is called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is really important. It allows oxygen to get to all your tissues in your blood, and without it, you would die. And so hemoglobin is critically important, and you can see how big, this is a whole protein here, and it's pretty crazy. It actually has about 7,000 atoms in it, just for reference. I mean, that's a lot of atoms, when you go to think from one atom is made of, 1 carbon atom is 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. And in this molecule here, we probably have close to 4,000 carbons. So, I mean, that's a lot of electrons, neutrons, and protons when you add them all up. And so that's kind of cool, you know, to think how big of things we can get just starting with, you know, these subatomic particles, which make atoms, which make molecules, which then make these large macromolecules that are so critical for life. So, in recap, I just want to go over kind of what we talked about here. So at the bottom we have the smallest particle called the subatomic particle. That's your electrons, protons, neutrons. When those come together in different numbers, they form the different atoms. And these can be seen on the periodic table. And when these atoms come together in different orientations and numbers, we get molecules, okay? And those are like the glucoses, ribose, water, ethanol, all those things. You know, there's lots of molecules that can be formed with different combinations of atoms, and it's pretty cool. And then once we put all these molecules together, we get these things called macromolecules, which is like the DNA and proteins. And once we put those all together, you know, you get you and me. And so without, you know, these subatomic particles, we have none of this. And without any of that, you know, we have no life. And so really, really cool stuff, and I hope you appreciate it for what it is, and it's really awesome. If you have any questions about this video, please feel free to contact me on Chegg. Once again, I'm Zach, and I tutor anything from algebra to biochemistry, calculus, kind of a wide range of topics that I can help with. But anyway, I look forward to seeing you on Chegg.com, and you have a good day.